Welcome to my channel. I'm going to change the CV joints on a Prado 120 series. This one is off the left hand side. It had started clunking, so that's when I noticed that the boot had got as bad as what it had. I knew that it already had a small tear in it, but I didn't know the tear had got this bad until it started making that dreaded CV clunking noise. This is the replacement. Both sides are the same. I'll put the part number in the description. To get to that center nut, underneath this cover and then behind that there is another cover. So before jacking it up, make sure they're all loose. Now I can jack it up. At this point it only has to be high enough to get the wheel off the ground, and put a stand there as well. So there's the other cap. It's also a good time to pop this cap out so it doesn't get in your way later on. Get that started and work your way around. And that's off. And get the old pin out. Keep that, you will need it. To get this nut off, the wheel has to be back on the ground. Put the wheel back on. When you're putting these wheels on, the hole is larger than the stud. So there is a spacer piece on the nuts. Now if I was to do that up like that, it will shear off the edge of the wheel. So if you can't put them on with your fingers, you're not lined up properly. And if you use a rattle gun, you will definitely damage the rim and maybe even strip the threads. If they get stuck, it usually only takes a bit of a wiggle, whether it be sideways or backwards and forwards. I'll do them up just a little bit. Just so I can undo that nut. Pull the stand out, let the jack down. You don't have to let the jack down all the way. This is a 36mm and a short extension, just so I can get past the wheel. Need the bigger crack bar for this one. Just making sure the nut comes all the way off the threads, that the threads aren't damaged. Now I'll jack it back up, take the wheel off, take that nut off, and then there are 2 more bolts underneath to undo. Now it's high enough to get the wheel off the ground again, and stands back under it. Now there's 2 bolts underneath either side of the lower ball joint. To get them out, I need to put a jack under the A-arm to support it. So I will let the jack down. Just double checking that stand. I'll let it down slowly because it will be on the stand. There's 1 bolt there. You've got the ball joint in the middle. You don't have to undo that. And there's another bolt, same position, same size, at the back. It helps to jack up the A-arm a little bit. It takes the pressure off of that. And the one at the back. Now that's starting to open up a little bit. Just jack that up a little bit more and it closed. And now there's no pressure on those bolts. It's easier to get them out. This seal isn't split as bad as the other side, but it's still split. That's the 2 bolts. Now you can let that down. Now with that nut off and the 2 bolts underneath off, you should not have to undo your steering arm or ball joints. You push on your axle and then pull it out from the back. Just like that. There's where it's held at the bottom, where the 2 bolts go through. And that gives you plenty of room without undoing anything else. I just swung that out of the way. There's the CV there. Now to get the other end out. Now I have a crowbar and a hammer, well, a mallet. If bodgy horrifies you, it's time to look away, because I'm going to jam this crowbar up behind where it joins onto the diff and lever it out. Now there is a washer type spacer seal thing there. I'm using a flat bladed screwdriver to bend that out of the way so I can get the crowbar in behind it. If you're doing it this way, make sure you have seals on standby, because there's a good chance you'll hit your seal. Before you take the CV joint out of the diff, if you don't want to drain your diff oil, jack up the side of the car as high as you can get it. It's usually enough to stop the diff oil leaking out. At most you might get a bit of a dribble, so you don't have to fill the whole thing up. Now because I've got it jacked up so high, I do have a second stand under there, but the second stand is a lot higher than the standard type of stand. And I also have a drip tray to catch any oil that might drip out. There we go. Now if I've got it up high enough, I shouldn't lose any oil. Still a little bit stuck, but the clip's been popped. There it goes. There's that little clip. That's what holds it in. As you can see, I damaged that seal a little bit. Get a screwdriver up behind the seal and it should just flip out. It looks like I need a bit of extra leverage. I'll use a crowbar. There it goes. There's a little bit of oil dribbling, so that's the bit that I damaged. Now the seals are different on either side. That one's the left side. You can see where I damaged it getting the CV shaft out. Left hand side, right hand side. They are slightly different. That's the part number for the left hand side, and that's the part number for the right hand side. I'm just going to give that a clean for the new seal to sit in. I don't know if you can see the oil in there, but that's how close the oil is to coming out. That's why I've got it jacked up so far. Try and minimise the amount of oil that comes out. I've got the new seal and I'm placing the old seal over the top so the new seal doesn't get damaged by the hammer. Seal only goes in a little bit. If it goes in too far, it will leak. That is only 1 or 2 mil past level with the outer casing of the diff. If you go in too far, only the outer lip of the seal will catch on the CV and it will leak. You need both inner and outer of these seals to stop it from leaking. So don't go all the way in with your seal because it will leak. Now put the shaft in, turn it a little bit to line up the splines. Just like that. Take the nut off of that. Turn that a bit to get the spines to line up, and that should just go in. And at this point, make sure that where your pin goes in is between your wheel studs. You don't want it to be on the same angle. It makes it hard to get your pin in and out. That should be all lined up. Now the inner is not in the diff yet. Put the nut on until it's about level there. Now a piece of wood so that doesn't get damaged. and a mallet to get the other end into the diff. Feels like it's in. Yep, I think that's in, but I'll give it another couple of taps just to make sure. They're the spots the two bolts go into. They go into there and there. It's easier to push this up with a jack because otherwise you won't get the two to line up. That is pretty well lined up on that side. And that side, you just got to line it up enough to get the bolt back into the hole. Again, if you have to force it, it's not lined up. Don't just go at it with a rattle gun. You'll end up doing damage. Now just line up the back one. And just give it a wiggle. Make sure they're as tight as you can get them with fingers, because you don't tighten these up until they're on the ground. And you should be right to let that jack down slowly now. And put the jack back under the car. Even though I do have two stands, I like to have a jack there as well. Now I'm just going to make this one finger tight. Again, this can't be tightened until the wheel is on the ground. That's tight enough. Now I'm going to take the really high stand out because it doesn't need to be up this high anymore. That's that stand. That's the one I use if it has to be up really high. So I'll let it down slowly. And now I'll put the wheel on. Now remember, don't just go at these with a rattle gun. Make sure everything's lined up, because the edge of these wheel nuts will catch on the edge of the rim. And then you'll wreck your rims. They're tight enough to put it on the ground. This nut has to be at 235. Okay, now to get the pin and the little locky tab on, you need to take the wheel off, because you can't get the pin to go around that corner. Now with this, you put it on the nut, lining up one of these grooves with the hole. It's not quite there. Either line up the hole with one of the flats or with one of the high spots, because that is right between how it's just past the hole, so it just doesn't line up. So I'll have to put the wheel back on just so I can move it that little bit more. I'll go just that little bit tighter to line that nut up a little bit better. A little bit more. Yep, that looks good. So before taking your wheel off, make sure that lines up. The hole lines up with that. Put that on, and a new pin. Put your cap on. Back after a forced brake, the GoPro overheated. Now I'll let it down, tighten them off properly, and then tighten the 2 bolts underneath. Now because I'm not taking the wheel off anymore, I can take the stand out from underneath. They're all tight. I'll line up the cap, put that on. Now the 2 bolts under here, the torque for them is apparently 130. That one's not all the way yet, I just tightened it up. Oh, that one's there. And so was that one. Now I'm going to top up the front diff oil. You need a 10mm Allen key for this. It is located right there behind the left side CV shaft. I've taken the wheel off to get the Camry in there, but you don't have to take the wheel off. I've put a drip tray underneath to catch any excess. If you jack the car up to take the wheel off, make sure you let it back down to about level, otherwise you will overfill your diff, and if you let it down too much, you'll underfill your diff. So there's the bolt. I'm filling this up with gear oil. That is full. Tighten that back up. Just like that. Now I just need to put the wheel back on and it's right to go. Hope this helps. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.